data stores, including web content, user information, document information, page information, and many other types of data used by the portal. By default, all search index data is stored locally on the same file system as the portal server, and search indexes are created and maintained by the portal process itself. The benefits gained from using these local search indexes are twofold. First off, the fact that the local file system is used to store index data results in excellent performance for both reading from and writing to the search indexes. Secondly, the amount of maintenance required for a single server is minimal when using this configuration. All of the search indexes are stored in a single location, and the file system configuration results in a largely hands-off search solution. However, there are some negative aspects to consider when evaluating local search indexes. Local indexes lack scalability due to the fact that it is not possible to have multiple processes perform writes on the same set of indexes. Additionally, the embedded Lucene solution does not provide any visibility into the index contents or process, which hinders both transparency and extensibility. This becomes a more salient issue when attempting to extend or customize Liferay search behavior. Now let's take a look at a few reasons why it often becomes necessary to factor search in as an enterprise-class portal function. First, the issue of scalability. In order to support search in larger scale environments, it becomes necessary to examine the function of search from an enterprise architecture standpoint. As you scale Liferay Portal up to meet high availability, disaster recovery, and enterprise performance requirements, it becomes necessary to consider clustering Liferay using either a strict or loose cluster topology. Regardless of the approach taken to address high availability, disaster recovery, and scalability within Liferay itself, search is one of the core functions within the portal that requires special consideration when setting up an enterprise-class environment. In order to provide acceptable search results in a cluster, it is necessary to ensure that search indexes are consistent, accurate, and perform acceptably across all members of the environment. A second reason to consider search as a core enterprise function within your portal architecture would be the potential need to extend search beyond the bounds of Liferay itself, either by incorporating content that is external to the portal in search functions executed within the portal, or by exposing content indexed within the portal to external processes. Finally, treating search as its own enterprise component simplifies the process of tuning the environment for search as an atomic function. Basically, this provides the opportunity to tune the performance of the search engine process independently of the portal process, allowing you to optimize the performance of each on a more granular level. Liferay provides multiple different solutions for this issue. First, Liferay Cluster Link provides a built-in process which mirrors search index updates across multiple Liferay nodes. Second, Lucene provides configuration mechanisms to allow sharing of search indexes among multiple portal instances. And third, Liferay provides an integration path for using Apache Solr as an enterprise search provider. In this webinar, we are focusing solely on the Solr solution. Now we'll take a moment to examine the Apache Solr product in order to illustrate what it is and how it provides enterprise search capabilities. Solr is a Java-based enterprise search application developed and distributed by the Apache Foundation. The core of the Solr server is a Java web application which must be installed and configured on a Java application server such as Apache Tomcat or JBoss application server. Solr is built on top of the Lucene search library. Essentially, it acts as a container providing Lucene services to external applications, primarily through the use of the Solr API. Versions of the Solr API exist for most major programming languages, including Java, .NET, C++, Ruby, and even JavaScript. Search content can additionally be ingested by the system via HTTP. Content submitted to the Solr server in this fashion must be formatted as XML, JSON, or CSV. Solr also provides a web-based administrative console, which gives us a means to access information about the operation of the Solr search engine, including statistical data, details of the contents of the search indexes, and even a querying mechanism to explicitly run search queries against the indexes. This console is a powerful tool for customizing and debugging search behavior. Finally, Solr does provide a means to configure disaster recovery and high availability for itself via clustering capabilities. Clustering Solr is a separate topic and will not be covered in this webinar. However, it is important to note that the facility exists. Official Liferay support for integrating with Solr is provided through a Liferay web plugin named Solr Web, which is distributed as an official plugin via the Liferay website. The Solr Web plugin has been developed against Solr version 1.4.1. Newer versions of Solr are not officially supported at this time. The Solr Web plugin is packaged with the relevant schema file needed to configure Solr with the appropriate indexing structure for the default set of content types used by Liferay. To complete the integration, this schema file needs to be deployed to the Solr server. The Solr Web plugin needs to be configured with the target Solr server's URL, and the plugin must be deployed to the running Liferay instance. Once deployment is complete, all searches executed in Liferay will automatically leverage the Solr instance rather than the internal Lucene indexes. Additionally, at this point, the Solr administration console can be used for viewing Liferay content indexed in the Solr server. Running queries against that content and reviewing search statistics becomes simple at that point. These capabilities can be very useful when customizing Liferay search facilities through faceted search, hooks, custom code, or any other mechanism. Additionally, the information provided in the Solr administration console can be very useful when attempting to debug issues arising within Liferay search, either due to custom code or integration, or when analyzing a potential defect. So now we'll take a minute to summarize everything we've covered thus far. Liferay out of the box ships with built-in search capabilities provided by Lucene, a Java-based search library. Lucene is an excellent solution for standalone applications, such as a single instance of Liferay Portal. However, to provide a more robust solution to your portal environment, it is necessary to modify this Liferay search configuration. One way of accomplishing this is to integrate Liferay with an enterprise search server. We have focused on Apache Solr, which is a free, open-source enterprise search platform providing many useful features which complement Liferay Portal. Integration between Liferay and Solr is accomplished through the use of an official Liferay plugin distributed by Liferay itself. This plugin transparently integrates Solr into the Liferay technology stack with minimum of configuration and customization via injection into Liferay Spring application context. Now we will proceed with a demonstration of a running Liferay Portal instance which has been integrated with Apache Solr as its search provider. For this exercise, we are using a Liferay Portal 6.1 EE portal instance, and the version of Apache Solr which is deployed is the supported version of 1.4.1. Now give me a moment while I switch over to a web browser. To give some background, this site is a demonstration site that we at Extivia have configured with various customizations to Liferay in order to simplify the process of presenting Liferay to potential clients and for knowledge transfer as well. So let me start in. For this particular demonstration, I'm going to run through a couple of different functions within Liferay itself. I'm going to demonstrate the functionality provided by the search portlet out of the box. I'm going to demonstrate customization of the search portlet by adding additional facets. And I'm going to run through a couple of different items on the Solr side. I'm going to demonstrate how you can verify that your Liferay instance is in fact querying Solr to perform search basically to perform search operations, and I'm going to run through the Solr administration console, running through some of the various tools that are provided by that console that can be used to facilitate customization and development within Liferay. So let me go to a page on which we have the search portlet deployed. For anyone who is familiar with Liferay, the search portlet obviously looks pretty familiar. It's the out-of-the-box Liferay search portlet with no customizations at this point. Now I'm going to switch over to a console window for a moment. This console window is a window that I have opened onto the server that is running the Apache Solr instance. And what I'm doing in this console window is I'm actually taking a look at the Solr application server log. So this log, the log that we're about to look at is the actual Solr log. And this is one of the easiest ways to determine whether or not Liferay is actually accessing Solr as its search mechanism. Now, as I stated, this is the application server log on the server that is hosting the Solr instance. Now, when I run a search here, I am going to search for ABC, which is the name of the company that, or the name of the fictitious company that this Solr instance is set up for. Now, within the search portlet, this then comes back with a number of different results. Comes back with, basically what we're looking at is about 27 results in this particular query. And so now what I want to do is I want to take a look at that log file and validate that the Solr instance was being hit by Liferay in order to appropriately generate those results for the search. And the easiest way to do that, obviously there was some activity in the log. If I scroll up, I can also see here this very large string of text is actually the Lucene query that Liferay submitted to the Solr server when I executed my search in the search portlet. If you want to get into how I know that, it's you can take a look at the actual query itself. You'll spot in any of the locations where it's actually looking for title equals ABC, URL is ABC, username is ABC. Yeah, I searched for ABC, and that's actually, this is the easiest heuristic you can use to determine how to validate that Liferay is actually hitting the Solr for its search results. So let's go back to the site itself. So then what I would like to do is I would like to demonstrate a couple of the features that are provided by Liferay search and how you can leverage Solr to attempt to make use of those features. Over on the left here, you'll see the various search facets as they're termed in Liferay. You have the facet, which is basically determining asset type, which is the everything block there on the left. You have the asset tag facet, you have the asset category facet, and you have the modified facet. These four facets are provided by Liferay out of the box by default in your search in the search portlet. Now what I have done is I have come up with an example modification to this portlet that will add an additional facet to the search display. So let me go ahead and illustrate how that is accomplished. So now at this point I'm looking back at the the default search portlet. I am going to go into the configuration of the search portlet, and by default this configuration would be advanced, and it would just show you the four standard facets that are available. I'm sorry, it would have been basic. Now I want to switch over to advanced so I can add additional facets. The search configuration is accomplished through a JSON block here, and this JSON right now contains the settings for the four facets that come by default with the search portlet. I have here a block that includes those four facets, and it also includes a facet to display the extension. It should happen to be a document library file type for one of the entries that is being returned as a result. I would like to show the extension as a facet. So let me copy that, and I will input it into the search configuration. save that. And now I'll execute my search again. And as you can see, that search then resulted in a new facet appearing on the left-hand side of the screen. That facet is basically indicating the extension for any files that are included from the document library that are showing up in my search results. Now there is one little gotcha here. If I click on PDF at this point, what you would expect to happen, you would expect to see the three results in the search, the three results that were PDFs. What actually is happening right here is it's showing 13 results. And the reason for that is that I basically set up a this is a very basic facet. All it's doing is it's showing the PDF, the number of PDFs in the search results. When I click on PDF, it's adding the word PDF to my search, and it's performing an additive search. It's not performing an exclusionary search. So basically, right now, it is doing a search as if I'm looking for ABC or PDF, not ABC and PDF. If you want to execute a search for ABC and PDF, that would require a bit more customization. It's certainly doable, but it wasn't quite as straightforward. So that's basically kind of like one of the gotchas that I have to mention about this. Now, let me go back, and I have another example facet, or another example of the use of facets that I'd like to present. And that example is going to be to take this particular search portlet instance and restrict it to only showing PDF documents that match the search results. So let me go in here. Now I have another sample search facet here, and I'll briefly explain the contents of this one. Essentially what I have is I have the 4 facets that come that come out of the box shipped with Liferay. This is just the everything facet, or the asset types facet. You've got the asset tags facet right here, highlighted right now. You have the asset categories facet highlighted right now. The modified facet is the one that I've got highlighted at this point. And now at the bottom I have 2 additional facets that I've added. I've added this facet, which basically is keying off of the entry class name field and restricting that entry class name to only DL file entry, or COM Liferay Portlet Document Library Model DL file entry type classes. And essentially what we're doing here is we're just telling the search that the only thing that I want to be able to retrieve from any search query executed on this portlet is our document library files, nothing else. So that's the first change. That's the first facet that I'm adding to restrict the number of results coming back from a search. And I have a second facet, which I'm doing a similar, basically something very similar. And instead, what I'm doing is I am restricting it at this point. I'm restricting the extension field to simply PDF, doc, XLS, and PPT. Now, for the purposes of this particular example, I only want it to be PDFs. So let me take that, and that's restricting the extension field. Now, I'll show you in a moment how to determine what fields are available through the Apache Solr administration console. So I'm sure that that's something that people are curious about. So let me update the contents of this particular portlet. So I just updated with the facets that I had defined there. Now let me search for ABC again. And now you'll see the only things that are matching are PDF files, PDF document library files, which are which match the ABC search string. So that is basically, that just kind of gives you two use cases for facets. Facets are an extremely powerful item in Liferay 6.1, allowing you to do a lot of different customizations on the search on a per operation level. Those are just two examples of pretty simple things that you can accomplish with Liferay faceted search. Now let me go over to the Solr administration page and give you a quick run through on what capabilities are provided by the Solr administration page, because this is actually fits in very well with the facets that we just modified. Now this, what you're looking at, is basically the front page for your Solr administration. On this page, you have a number of different options. I mean, obviously, it's not the most user-friendly presentation, but it doesn't have to be, because normally you're normally not looking at this, only if you're looking to do some analysis or some troubleshooting. So the options on this page, which we are primarily interested in examining, will be the Schema Browser, the statistics, and the query interfaces. The rest of the options on this page can be useful, but those are the three that you'll most often be using. And those are the ones that really give you visibility and access to the internals of the search indexes themselves. So first off, let's look at the Schema Browser. So what the Schema Browser is, you may recall that earlier in the webinar I had mentioned that the Solr web application ships with a schema.xml file that you then update. You would then deploy to your Solr instance in order to contain the appropriate structure for content stored by Liferay. This Schema Browser gives you a way to browse that the contents of that schema.xml file, and also view the the contents of the search indexes that match particular fields and particular field types. So first off, working our way from the bottom up, we have field types. The field types are just the defined types of content that can be assigned to fields. It's relatively straightforward. If you are defining customized field types, you might define a customized field type in a situation where you have a field that requires specific types of tokenization within searches. If you have a field which basically you want to apply more rigid controls to than just saying it is a string or it is an integer, something along those lines. So that field, the field types that basically covers what field types are. Dynamic fields are fields which are not necessarily, basically these are fields that are not captured by explicitly defined fields within schema.xml. So it gives kind of a way to provide catch-all field types for fields that you haven't actually defined specifically in the XML file. Generally speaking, these dynamic fields, you'd like to avoid using them. You'd much rather use specific, like strongly typed and strongly specified field types if you can. But it becomes useful to have these if you know that you have items that you want to be able to search on. And generally you want to be able to add those so on a dynamic basis, and you don't necessarily want to have to modify the schema.xml and restart your Solr instance in order to search on those fields. So, and anyone familiar with Liferay development will probably recognize the expando field, and this is how Liferay handles searching of expando fields. So now let's look at the field section, which is probably basically where the meat of things are. If we go back to my example where I limited the results of the search portlet based on extension, where the way that I knew that extension was a field that I could then use as a facet was by visiting this Solr administration schema browser, going through and looking into what items were available in the Solr search indexes. And if I could find, there we are. So I had spotted extension and looking at the contents of the field extension. And it's a field type string. And basically looking at the top 10 terms, we have JPG, PNG, PDF. But this was obviously the field that I could then use to limit my search results based on the extension of the files. So I mean, this is one way of going about getting that information. So this is kind of where the Schema Browser comes in handy. So let me back up to the main page again, and let's discuss the Solr statistics page. The statistics page is one where you probably would not use very often, but it comes in very handy when you do need to use it, because it gives you basic information on the state of the Solr server and on the state of the indexes themselves. So if we look down here under core, and you'll note that there is the stats section here. Under stats, the numdocs portion, which I'm attempting to highlight, that basically contains the number of documents right now that are indexed in the search in your search indexes. So we've got 4,387 documents indexed in this particular Solr instance. This is obviously an aggregate number of all documents in the indexes. So it really kind of just comes in handy when you're trying to basically if you're attempting to determine whether or not items are being indexed properly. So if you have integrated, if you've gone through an initial installation of Solr, you've gone through the integration process for Liferay, and you have re-indexed all of your content, and you come to this particular page and you see numdocs is 0, then you know that there is a problem. There's some problem occurring with the communication between Liferay and Solr. So this is obviously not the only way to diagnose that kind of problem, but it is a tool that you can use to diagnose it. So, and then one of the other areas that on this page that comes in particularly handy, especially for tuning and optimization, would be the cache statistics. So cache statistics basically give you an idea of how many hits, how many misses you're getting on your cache at the moment. So at the moment we don't have a whole lot. We don't have a large number of hits on this server, but there's really not a lot of traffic going to the server. So that's basically why that's occurring. But we have a cumulative hits number of 49. So we've had 49 cache hits since the Solr server has been up. And obviously this server doesn't see a lot of traffic, so that would be why that's low. In a production level situation, you will probably look at this, and it will give you an idea of areas where you might need to tune your caches. And caches are tuned within the Solr configuration itself. I'm not going to go into the process of how that works in specifics. If anyone's interested in that, you can certainly contact me, and I'll be happy to go into it later. So those are two of the items that you kind of can look at from on the Solr statistics page in the admin console. They're kind of handy. And there's additional information which can be useful. Some query stats and some just basic numbers on how Solr is operating. So let me go back, and this will be actually one of the last things that I cover in this demo, and then we'll move back over to the slides and get into some Q&A. So the next thing that I just wanted to kind of run through is to demonstrate one of the ways in which you can use the Solr console to debug or test out queries that are coming in, and maybe they're coming in from Liferay. You're not getting results that you expect to get. This query interface is where you would then go to debug that. So now, for example, let's see. If I go back to my Solr log, I can go and I can find this query string, which has been sent to Solr by Liferay. If this, let's say this query string is not returning the results that I really expected to see come out from it, I can take this string, and I would need to basically select the entire query string out, de-URL encode it because it's in the web logs and it's been URL encoded here, and then I would paste it into this query into the query string interface, and that'll give me the results that I'm looking for, or at least give me an idea of what those results might be. For simplicity's sake, I've already URL decoded that particular query, and I will paste it into this query interface here. And you'll see, oh, hang on, this happened again. Wait. There we are. So you will see that basically this is the response that the server would have gotten back if it sent Solr this particular query. And so once again, it reiterates what the query is, and then you've got in XML format all of the various. You'll have the various result sets. It would be the result set that results from that particular query, and the information that you were looking for based on the query structure. So in this situation, then you could take this particular query. If you were looking to find out why you weren't getting the results that you expected out of the query that you made, or out of your Liferay query, you could then tweak the query itself, modify this query, and try to determine what is kind of breaking down. So it comes in handy on a somewhat limited basis, but the ability to do this is pretty huge when you're having a problem. So, all right. Now that pretty much wraps up the items that I had to cover in my demonstration. So let's see here. So now I think what we'd like to do is open it up to some question, I guess a Q&A portion of this webinar. If you have any questions, make sure that you submit them in the questions panel, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Keith, great job. We do have a couple questions here. One was really specific to someone's need, and I'll let you decide, Keith, if it's something that's worth sharing with the broader audience. But it says, this person from New York says, I want to know what Liferay provides for clustering Solr, or do we have recommendations for Solr clustering? Okay.
I'd be happy to address that at this point. That's a fairly common question that comes up. So there are a couple of different ways of handling a high availability type or a scaling type problem with Apache Solr. Solr does provide the ability to basically it provides a capacity for itself to be clustered. Now the problem with clustering Solr is that a cluster topology for Solr is somewhat complicated. And the reason for that is, once again, Solr uses Lucene as its backend. Lucene cannot be written to by more than one process at a time. The Lucene indexes, because they're file system-based indexes, you can always move them into a database. There are performance problems there. Essentially, a cluster topology for Solr itself tends to look a little complicated. You wind up having multiple Solr instances that are basically read-only instances that are then used by your target applications, and you may have one master write and basically one master instance which is used to write to the search indexes, and that master will then propagate index information out to the readers. In a situation where the master goes down, you then have to promote a reader to be the new master. So I guess basically what I'm getting down to is that that particular type of clustering setup looks and is it's a little more complicated than optimal. There's another solution for that you can use when you're dealing with a Liferay instance, and this is actually the one that we most often have recommended. it gets around. It has some issues in and of itself, but it basically gets around some of the complexity of the straight Solr cluster, and that is that you can then set up two Solr instances that are independent of each other. They do not. There's no communication, no knowledge of that either Solr instance has of the other instance. But basically, what you do is you set up your Liferay instance to send all search for write requests. So basically, anything that needs to be added to the search index is sent to both Solr servers. And your Liferay instances will dynamically, they will basically on kind of a load-based, load-based round-robin fashion. They will send their search read queries to one server or another. So basically, they will then iterate through the search and the 1 to n search servers that you have set up, and use those in order to actually execute search queries. Obviously, the disadvantage of that is that you are increasing the amount of traffic going from your Liferay instance to Solr, because you have to send all write information has to go to all Solr servers that you set up. And from a practical standpoint, the amount of traffic that we've seen generated by that isn't really, it's not terribly significant. It's not one that's caused any kind of performance issue in even large scale Liferay sites. So then essentially what you do is and then I guess in this situation, if one of your Solr servers goes down, the other server is still available to execute search reads and writes, and it basically requires much less care and feeding. So hopefully that's kind of answered your question. You can go either route. You can go the clustered route, which gives you a little bit more in terms of basically in terms of the fundamental infrastructure there, because if you go a fully clustered route, then you are guaranteed that the search indexes are consistent, and you're also guaranteed that if they're not consistent, you're going to get an error. If you go the independent server route, there's no process that's going to keep those, there's nothing other than just your normal operations that are going to keep your Solr instances up to date properly. From a practical standpoint, though, it really isn't that big of it isn't it isn't very problematic. You don't see problems come up with the consistency of your search indexes in that scenario. So I do see one quick follow-up here. If two Solr instances go out of sync, sorry, that's a good one. If you have two Solr instances do go out of sync, how do you sync them back up? I guess so. The very simple answer to that is what you will do is at that point is you have to perform a full reindex of all of your content through Liferay. If you're familiar with Liferay, I'll demonstrate where that is located in the Liferay interface. If I go to our Liferay instance here and go into server administration, on this page right here, there is a reindex all search indexes button, and that when I click on that, when you click on that button, that would reindex and resync up all of your Solr instances if you had multiple Solr instances messed up. Now there is a possibility that if you had a Solr instance that died mid-write, that this may not solve the problem. And you would be able to determine that by executing this process and watching that target Solr server. If the Solr server is running into errors when it's trying to reindex, and what you have to do is you have to stop the Solr server, delete the indexes which are located in the Solr home directory, and then run through this process again. Because there is the possibility that your search indexes may have been corrupted on the file system. Generally speaking, once again, that's not something that we've seen happen very often at all, but it is a possibility. But yeah, this is basically what you'd have to do, and you would have to go through a full reindex. There's no way just to incrementally reindex parts of your search indexes. You've got to do the whole thing. So,
Great. We've got some great questions and follow-up questions coming out of New York. I want to jump over to another one that came up here, Keith. How difficult is it to implement Solr into an existing Liferay environment? And then some details. Trying to determine if it's necessary to implement Solr initially, or if it would be possible to change from Lucene easily at a later point.
It's actually very easy to change later. The only downside of that is that the more content you generate in Liferay, the longer it's going to take when you initially index all of your content into Solr. So that's probably the only thing I would say that would cause a problem. But the actual implementation process is fairly transparent, and you can do it when you first install Liferay, or you can do it 2 years after you first installed Liferay. The amount of work will be it'll be exactly the same. The only difference would be the amount of time it takes for all content in the portal to be indexed once you bring Solr up. But then once you go through, that's a one-time process. Once you've done it, you don't have to do it again unless something terrible happens to your Solr instance. So I hope that answers the question. So
great. We've got some great questions. Yeah, we've got more great questions coming in here, and keep them coming. If anyone of our attendees has more questions, please keep them coming. We'll keep working through these. The next one: are there any plans for Liferay to support Apache Solr versions more recent than 1.4.1?
So I can't really speak for Liferay. It does. I've seen people talk about this before, and I think that they are working on possibly supporting later Solr versions in an official from an official capacity. But it's I can't necessarily say absolutely yes they're going to, because I think they do have a very so Solr 1.4.1 works very well for Liferay. Now all that being said, it is possible to use more recent versions with the Solr Web plugin and with Liferay. It just requires some expert level customization of the Solr Web portlet. Basically what you have to do is you have to update the libraries used by the Solr Web portlet, and you have to update the schema files that are provided. It is certainly possible, but it's like I said, it's one of those things that you would definitely need to know what to update in the schema.xml file to get it working. So.
Great. We have them coming in still, Keith. So let me. Here's another new one. Can Solr be used to search portlet configuration? For example, searching for strings and URLs configured in web proxy portlets.
Actually, yes, that information is stored in Solr. By default, the search portlet does not access that. It won't search those, and it will not return them. But you, at least portlet configuration information is stored in Solr. Exactly how much of it is, there is some of it in there, and I can't tell you where the demarcation is of what's indexed and what's not. But I do know that your search. Let me see, searching for your strings and URLs configured for web proxy portlets. I think that's the question that I'm answering here, and I believe that information does exist in the Solr search indexes. If it doesn't, it would not be that difficult to add. What you basically would need to do is you need to do that through a hook. So. Yeah, basically my answer would be yes, you can perform that search. Out of the box, you would have to either just write your Lucene query and execute it in the Solr admin console, or you would need to modify the search portlet in order to actually access that information, because by default it will not. Or if it's not in there, and like I said, I'm about 95% certain that it is, then it would be pretty easy to add that to the index fields, and the way that you would do that is just by adding a pretty simple hook to Liferay, which would then add that additional content into your search indexes, and that's actually there are methods defined that you can then override within even just in a JSP and a hook to do that. So.
All right, great, Keith. I'm going to keep them coming here. Aside from Solr, what other search mechanisms can be used with Liferay? Is the Google Search appliance supported?
So at this point, the only enterprise search, I guess the only enterprise search server that is explicitly supported by Liferay is Solr. There has been, once again, this is one of those. This is an area that I know that they're working on for EE at this point. They've been talking about and working on direct integration with the Google Search appliance, as a matter of fact. But yeah, at the moment, the only one that's officially supported is Solr. But I think yeah, hopefully the integration with GSA should be coming up pretty soon. So.
Okay, we've got one more here. Unless some more come in, we're glad to take some more. Go ahead, Keith.
I was going to say I did see one follow-up that I wanted to address real quick, and that was a question as to whether or not there is a property in Liferay that tells it to fall back to Lucene if Solr fails. There is not. So if your Solr infrastructure goes down, then even if there were a way for it to fall back to Lucene, your Lucene search indexes would not be up to date because it's basically when it updates when it's updating Solr and not Lucene. Now, if you manually if your Solr infrastructure went down and you said, "Oh, I need to go back to I need something for search right now," it would be you could then go in and disable the Solr web plugin, which would then cause Liferay to just to immediately switch back over to using the Lucene, the local Lucene indexes. But at that point, you would have to re-index all your content in Lucene, and if you're in a clustered environment, it would not. Then your searches would not then be guaranteed to be accurate across multiple nodes in the cluster. So.
Okay, great. And then again, keep the questions coming in. We just have one more here, but we're glad to take more if there's more to be posed. So go ahead and submit those through the Q&A panel. Otherwise, this will be our last question. Does Solr provide any way to easily index content that is not stored in the portal?
That's a good question. I guess generally speaking, when this comes up, this usually comes up because people want to index, say, like a static website outside of portal, or maybe some documents that are not going to be stored in the document library. And the answer is it does provide a mechanism, and the mechanism would be that basically it's the Solr APIs. There are a few community-based tools that will help you index certain types of content, but given the fact that search tends to be a very, and especially things like search tokenization, the tokenization of content for searching and things like that, they tend to be a very per problem, or I guess per project issue. There's no command line client that you can use. There's nothing along those lines. What you generally have to do is you have to write either a script or a small program to iterate through your content and actually submit content into the portal from outside. So it's not simple, but the Solr API is fairly simple. Chances are, if you're working with Liferay and you're developing custom portlets, then you probably would have the facility to be able to to design either a small script or a small program in order to get that information into your Solr instance. So, but yeah, there's nothing straight out of the box that allows you to do it.
And we had one more come in, just somebody wanting to get in just under the wire here. We'll keep taking them right up until the top of the hour if they keep coming. In a cluster environment, where is the index data for each instance of Solr stored? Is it common to both nodes or separate for each node for Solr?
Each node of Solr has its own index data. If you have clustered Solr, then each node is going to have its own index. For the read nodes, those indexes are only going to be read. They'll never do a write on them, except for when they're contacted by the master node, which will be read-write. And then basically the master node will have the canonical version of the indexes. But each local node does have its own copy of the indexes, and obviously the reason for that is just for a performance standpoint, for performance reasons.
Great. And Keith, I don't know about the rest of the audience. I'm assuming they're as impressed as I am. The questions that come in and for you to be able to answer those so quickly and off the top of your head, clearly it demonstrates not only your expertise but your team's expertise there in Austin. And I know that we're proud to say that we can offer solutions and services for Liferay projects of any sizes, and I think your demonstration today of your knowledge and experience with Liferay is sure helpful in helping our audience understand the breadth of understanding and experience we have with Liferay. So, since we've come to the end of our questions, why don't we jump to that slide? We're talking just in preparing a slide to wrap this up. What the next steps might be for people if they need additional support or additional questions. Let's talk through that before we wrap up.
Okay. For any of those interested in more information about Solr, Liferay, or the integration between the two, please feel free to contact me. My email address is right there on the screen. It's koconnell@extivia.com. Obviously, additional resources for Apache Solr can be found on the Solr website at lucene.apache.org/Solr. And additional information on Liferay Portal can be found at the Liferay website, which is www.liferay.com. Any who are interested in the process of integrating Liferay and Solr can read through an example integration that I've documented on the Extivia blog site, which is blogs.extivia.com. If you go to blogs.extivia.com and just search for Solr, you should basically at that point you'll get the blog in question. Or you can write down that big long URL I've got there on the screen. As always, we at Extivia are available to assist with any and all needs that you may have with the Liferay Portal server. For more information, you can contact us at info@extivia.com or at the toll-free number on the screen. And I just wanted to thank you all for attending, and I hope that this session has been both interesting and informative.
Keith, great job today. Thank you for your time, and to all of our attendees, thank you for your time as well. Keep in mind, too, that in addition to our Liferay and portal services, we do have services including business intelligence, data warehousing, data management, and application development. Thanks for attending today's webinar from Extivia.
Muted. For your